Oh, hey there. Welcome to my reading of A Course in Miracles. This is the 70th day in our 2021 calendar year. This is the 70th. It's the 70th lesson in our Course in Miracles. Our course in what? Our course in miracles. And what is a miracle? A miracle is a change in perception from fear of separation and death and decay and pain and dust and rust and decay and all this sort of shitty stuff to a representation of a perception that symbolizes or represents wholeness, health, healing, happiness, hallelujah, goodness, gracious. A miracle is a perception of symbolic of forgiveness. For what? Forgiveness. Yeah, forgiveness. Okay. Today's lesson goes along the way of yesterday's. Yesterday's was my grievances hide the light of the world in me, and we in that lesson went in our minds and we said, hey, your mind is like a sphere of light. It's surrounded by clouds and you think you're outside it, and all you can see is the clouds that seem to surround what you really are and you think you're outside of. We were meant to go through it, to symbolically feel the clouds on our face, push them away and feel, God, feel the power of creation pulling us into the light we are. There's our center. And today we do something similar along those ways. Yesterday we saw that those clouds were the grievances that we think, well, of course I feel bad because blah, 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 or any sort of simple grievance, she's cool, but she shouldn't wear green, something simple like that. This would be all right if only blah, blah, blah. This is our excuse to choose to not feel wonderful now. There's not a good reason in the world for us to do that. That's what the Course is saying. There's no good reason for us in the world to do that, actually. So anyway, today, hey, yay, Mishali, yay, goodness gracious, yay. Oh, Mishali says, yay. I say, heck yeah, for heaven's sake, yay. And so today, anyway, it's similar, but these clouds are going to represent ways that we thought we would find fulfillment or salvation in the world. These clouds yesterday represented grievances. Today, they're going to represent ways we thought we would find fulfillment, ways we tried to say, when this happens, it'll be better, blah, 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 And there is I found, as I was thinking of sharing this with y'all, that this sounds very arrogant. My salvation comes from me, especially if you're like anything like a traditional Christian person. Then you'd be like, hey, it only comes from, whatever, Jesus, or something like that. But I think that you'll feel that when it talks about that your guilt comes from nowhere, but so too does your salvation come from nowhere, but it'll land easier for those who may think this sounds arrogant. Okay? Okay, well, let's read here, and let's hear what I'm going to read right now. Before we do so, let's remind ourselves the Course doesn't ask us to believe in this. Hey, remember, it may be like, that sounds so arrogant. And it tells us, in fact, we'll be actively resist it. We will probably actively resist some of it, but that if we do so, it's okay. And that if we listen in and we hear, we practice, we let these sort of things rumble in our heart. If we remind ourselves and remember that we will have a positive effect of these practices. It's going to ask us to do 2 longer practice periods today, 10 to 15 minutes. I already did my first, and I'll do my second later. It says when to choose when to do those. I've been doing my first one already for many days at 8:20 pretty much every day, and or somewhere right around there. Anyway, okay. Also, this stuff, it's holographic. This information's holographic, meaning you pick up any point of it, really. You pick up all of it, but it does have a sequentiality, definitely. So, okay, here we go. Are you ready? Okay, I'm going to assume you are. If you're listening, if you were born ready, okay? all temptation is nothing more than some form of basic temptation to not to believe the idea for today. All temptation is nothing more than some form of the basic temptation not to believe the idea for today. Your salvation comes from you. Your salvation comes from you. But the mind says but, and these are the temptations of these are the a form of the basic temptation to not believe this idea that I could choose. It's the choice is inside. It's not outside. It's not external to me. It's my choice. You see? Okay, so here we go. Salvation seems to come from anywhere except from you. You think it's in the, when you are gonna land that business deal, when you'll get that boy or that girl or that squirrel or that toy or whatever, it seems to come from anywhere but you. Everything gets used for this purpose eventually, but also eventually we realize that it has to come from within. We can't, even in relationship or something like that, we go into this not trying to get something from it, but to give something to. Okay? So too does the source of guilt. So salvation seems to come from anywhere except for yourself, and also the source of guilt seems to come from anywhere but yourself. When you realize that all guilt is solely, you see neither guilt nor salvation as in your own mind and nowhere else. You see neither guilt nor salvation in your own mind and nowhere else. You think it comes from because blah, 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 because blah, 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 or if only blah, 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 if only da, 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 outside yourself. You see it anywhere except for your mind. And when you realize that all guilt is solely an invention of your mind, you also realize that guilt and salvation must be in the same place. In understanding this, you are saved. Guilt and salvation are both in the same place. A decision in the mind, in the meaning making that is what you kind of are as a mind, as a willful, the will part of you. So this goes into Heather Berger, who regularly visits this reading, asked yesterday, what is the tiny mad idea? And it's something I've often gone over in these lessons, and I guess I think she's kind of new to this. So the guilt comes into our mind from the tiny mad idea. The most basic of premises of the Course in Miracles, the prime directive, the primary metaphysics of truth, is that the truth is true. It's only true. That's all there is. Anything other than it is, quote unquote, not true. And the truth doesn't change. Otherwise, it would change to something that wasn't true. The truth is always, as it is, true. Truth is unlimitedly true. Whatever you think of it is actually a box around it, so it's not whatever you think of it actually. This is where we got to let go of our ideas and have it be an experience. There is no universal curriculum, but there is a universal experience. These are the ways that the Course talks about this. Anyways, so that's the most basic prime directive of the Course. It's the metaphysics of truth. The truth is true, and there's nothing other than it. There are no lies that are true. The truth doesn't fight with lies. The truth is all there is. And then there can seem to be appearances, right? The same way we know there can seem to be monsters in a kid's closet. But that if we have the kid look, if we shine the light, they disappear. So anyways, okay, so the tiny mad idea. This is where guilt comes from. This is, again, just a helpful way of, as we, the Course uses logic really well, so it says it's natural for the mind to want to ask, okay, the truth is true and only the truth is true. That makes logical sense, or poetically put, nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists, and herein lies the peace of God. That sounds cool. And as you read along, eventually somewhere, like, I don't know, a quarter away into the text of the Course, it says, hey, you're really liking these ideas. If you've gotten this far, they feel true to your heart and your mind, but you start to wonder. It's natural for you to ask, how did the world seem to appear to start? It says there isn't really a true answer because it never really did. These are ways of, again, undoing the meaning of the world in some way, the way it speaks about these things. But it says this is a helpful origin story for the world of story, the world of appearances, the world of appearances appearing to appear to start, is this: into the mind of God, where all was one and always will be one, there crept a tiny mad idea. This is how the world appeared to appear to start. Into the mind of God, where all was one and always will be one, there crept a tiny mad idea, at which it forgot to laugh, at which it remembered not to laugh, at which it remembered not to laugh. And this tiny mad idea is, what if I could be other than what I am? What if I did things different to how they are supposed to be? What if there was something against what is? There's a bunch of other sort of ways, different types of angles, and when you take a few of them, they kind of can help. There's a few other ways that you could put that, but something like that. What if there was something other than what is? What if something opposed what is? So the mind, being a powerful ability, create the light of creation through that filter and saw the stories of what that would look like. The stories of what that would look like through the filter of the projection of the light that the mind shines through the filter of what it would look like if something opposed what is. And it saw the stories of what that would look like. It would look like the pandemonium. It would look like communication that doesn't communicate. It would look like bodies born innocent, ready to be traumatized and victimized. It would look like creators that don't care for their creation, or something like that. So the mind, taking this idea seriously, thought that that's what it identified with that. It identified with being that little thing. And then the truth sort of came in and said, hey, bro, hey, yo, hey, sis, yo, hey, no, there's only the truth is true. But having identified with having identified with this tiny mad idea, it felt like now the truth was saying that what you are isn't real. No, what you are is real, but your tiny self isn't, and you are identified with it. So you, we, I, me, he, and she feel to defend this thing. We made up the world to be a place where truth could enter not, where God could not be, where we would be protected in our tininess from annihilation into nothingness. We think there's nothing but this. The Course is telling us, no, this isn't. This is nothing. What you are is the light, and you're the shiny light, and you're eternal, and yeah. And that's all. That's the tiny mad idea. So the guilt comes the guilt comes in the mind from thinking we had done this, from feeling like we did separate from God, from our source, from creation. We ruined heaven, and we feel like we're sure, or the mind feels like it's sure that it did something wrong and that it's going to be punished. So, but this all comes from this. It's an innocent little tiny mad idea that needs to be forgiven, but it seems like a holographic comic book that we were just like hypnotized. It's like a little tiny marble that we're looking at, and we're like, oh my God, it's a hypnotized pop-up book, comic book in a marble. Okay, so the seeming cost, so second paragraph. Okay, that was an answer to, oh yeah, cool. Carolina says she's getting terrible reception where she's at. She'll be back before bed, and have a nice day. You too, dear. Thank you. Okay, so when you realize that all guilt is solely an invention of your mind, you also realize that guilt and salvation must be in the same place. In understanding this, you are saved. You are saved in understanding this, that guilt and salvation come from the same place in the mind. Misha says, ooh, how do you say that? Ooh, I'm not sure. I love tiny mad idea story, time shared through the lens of a sweet fella called Joey. Oh, me too. I love that too. Thank you. I love that you love that. Thank you. I'm loving this. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so paragraph number 2. The seeming cost of accepting today's idea is this. It means that nothing outside yourself can save you. Nothing outside yourself can give you peace. But it also means that nothing outside yourself can hurt you or disturb your peace or upset you in any way. This is pretty uncompromising, eh? Today's idea places you in charge of the universe where you belong because of what you are. You belong in charge of the universe because of what you are. Today's idea places you there. This is not a rule that can be partially accepted. See, that's where if you pick up any part of this, you pick up all of it. You either pick up all of it or you pick up none of it, actually, the Course says. It'll seem that it'll be through little bits and pieces, but it's uncompromising, actually. It's either all or none. There is this kind of, it's intense, this uncompromisingness of the Course in Miracles. This is not a rule that can be partially accepted, and you must surely begin to see that accepting it is salvation. Accepting that your salvation comes from you, or my salvation comes from me. Okay, paragraph number 3. It may not, however, be clear to you why the recognition that guilt is in your own mind entails the realization that salvation is there as well. It may not, however, be clear to you why the recognition that guilt is in your own mind entails the realization that salvation is there as well. God would not have put the remedy for sickness where it cannot help. Your Creator, the solution to your problems, the Holy Spirit, the answer to the problem wouldn't be put where it can't help. That is the way your mind has worked. Your mind has worked to try to displace your mind, the tiny mad idea, the mind that took seriously the tiny mad idea has worked to try to displace where the solution can be found. But that is not how Creator's creating mind works. He wants you to be healed, and so he has kept the source of healing where the need for healing lies, the creative mind. The choice to choose, not because of external, but the world should be, and why can't it, and I demand that it be. Outside needs to change for me. That is like a symbolic representation of the hell we're attempting to get out of. Okay, paragraph number 4. You have tried to do just the opposite, making every attempt, however distorted and fantastic it might be, to separate healing from the sickness for which it was intended. You've tried, and you've made every attempt, however distorted and fantastic it might be, to separate healing from the sickness for which it was intended, and thus keep the sickness. You try to separate healing from the sickness, and so you could keep the sickness. You're trying desperately. Your purpose was to ensure that healing did not occur, because we don't feel like healing will be healing. By the Course's standards, we feel like we'll be annihilated, and that there's nothing else. God's purpose was to ensure that it did. God's purpose is to ensure that it does happen. Paragraph number 5. Today we practice realizing that God's will and ours are really the same in this. We practice recognizing that we have God's will with us. Remember, this is the actual salvation is now. I am not disconnected from my source. I can feel that even while while I seem to, in a story, be Joey who's being threatened by whatever, bills not happening, whatever, strong man threatening. I can say salvation is now. This is the representation of the Jesus parable, him being like strung up on a cross, and forgive this unconscious world, for it knows not what it does. Or I've practiced this from a humanistic level, my nervous system. One time I was on a porch in a jungle and given lots of acupuncture, and I noticed there were bugs crawling on me, and the people were around me. They were kind of having a party, and the lady who put the acupuncture in me said she'd be back in 45 minutes, and just playing with the nervous system in some way, relaxing it, despite, it seeming to be very triggered by all these bugs crawling on me and mosquitoes, and just deciding that I could choose to not tense up or I would do that every once in a while, and then I would relax. This is a way that the Course in Miracles and the training, this mind training, this nervous system training, this heart training is helpful for sure. Okay, today we practice realizing that God's will and ours are really the same in this. God wants us to be healed, and we do not really want to be sick because it makes us unhappy. Therefore, we don't really want to be sick because we don't really want to be, this temper tantrum kid or something like that, because it makes us unhappy. Therefore, in accepting the idea for today, we are really in agreement with God. Hey, Lisa Marie. Hey, Brent. Good day. Welcome. God wants us to be healed, and we don't really want to be sick because it makes us unhappy. Therefore, in accepting the idea for today, we are really in agreement with God. We have God's will with us. We do not need to do something different. We don't need to salvation is now. Salvation is now. I think that's the way to say it. He does not want us to be sick, neither do we. He wants us to be healed, and so do we. We are joined with his will in this. Paragraph number 6. We are ready for two longer practice periods today, each of which should last some 10 to 15 minutes. We will, however, still let you decide when to undertake them. Sometimes the Course will give us specific times. Hey, Lisa, hey. Sometimes the Course will give us specific, hey, do it right in the morning, do it right in the evening, but this is saying we can decide when. And then it says, we will follow this practice for a number of lessons. So for a number of the next lessons, there'll be 2 practice periods of 10 to 15 minutes. And it would be again well to decide in advance when would be a good time to lay aside for each of them, and then adhering to your own decision as closely as possible. Like me, I've been doing, of course, for the last 10 or so lessons has had us do 10 or 15 minutes of meditation practice, and specific to each lesson, but to try to do it close to the same time every day. And so it's asking us now to do 10 to 15 minutes at which times we choose, and close to the same time of the day. And so, so paragraph number 7. Begin these practice periods by repeating the idea for today, my salvation comes from me, adding a statement signifying your recognition that salvation comes from nothing outside of you. Nothing outside of you. There's nothing. It's not external to you. There isn't a reason in the world. There isn't a reason in the world. The reason is within. You might put it this way. My salvation comes to me. It cannot come from anywhere else. Then we're going to devote a few minutes with our eyes closed to reviewing some of the external places where we have looked for salvation in the past, in other people, in possessions, in various situations and events, and in self-concepts that we sought to make real, recognizing that it is not there, and telling ourselves. So we're going to see all the ways we thought we would, when this happens, when that, the franticness of the world, and we'll say, my salvation cannot come from any of these things. My salvation comes from me and only from me. Hey, Brent Wilson, good day. Paragraph number 8. Now we will try again to reach the light in you, which is where your salvation is. You cannot find it in the clouds that surround the light, and it is in them that you have been looking for it. At the beginning of this lesson, I referenced yesterday's lesson about the clouds. You may want to, if you're joining in late here, you may want to go back and watch that or listen in here. Okay, so you cannot find it in the clouds that surround the light. It is in them that you have been looking for it, but it is not there. It is past the clouds and in the light beyond them. Remember that you will have to go through the clouds before you can reach the light, but you got to go through. The only way out is through. But remember also that you have never found anything in the cloud patterns you imagined that endured, or that you wanted. Yes?
If we're going to be there at 2:30, we need to leave pretty soon.
All right, I'm almost done here. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
That's my friend Judy. I gave her a massage just now. Since all illusions of salvations have failed you, surely you do not want to remain in the clouds, looking vainly for idols there. Since all illusions of salvation have failed you, surely you don't want to remain in the clouds, looking vainly for idols there. When you could so easily walk on into the light of real salvation. Try to pass the clouds by whatever means appeals to you. If it helps you, think of me, holding your hand and leading you. And I assure you, it will be no idle fantasy. When it says think of me, the Course claims to be written, the voice of the Course, the narrator, claims to be Jesus Christ himself. So if you want, you could think of, Jesus Christ reaching out his hands to bring you through the clouds into the light. You could also think of Brother Buddha, Holy Mother, anything. But he assures us, though, it will not be an idle fantasy. So paragraph number 10, and I got to go after this. For the short and frequent practice periods today, remind yourself that your salvation comes from you and nothing but your own thoughts can hamper your progress. You are free from all external interference. You are in charge of your salvation. You are in charge of the salvation of the world. Say then, for the shorter frequent practice periods, several times an hour, as often as possible, my salvation comes from me. Nothing outside of me can hold me back. Within me is the world's salvation and my own. Say to yourself frequently, my salvation comes from me. Nothing outside of me can hold me back. Within me is the world's salvation and my own. All right, everybody. Good day in your practice today. The 70th day of our 2021 calendar year, and the 70th lesson in our Course in Miracles. This year we're giving to miracles. And much love. Ciao, everybody.